once again, the plot thickens for the rear-wheel drive Model Y. So when this thing first came out, we knew by looking at the curb weight that it was not the same standard range Model Y that Tesla briefly sold way back in 2021 for only a couple of weeks and then got rid of. We knew it was using 2170 cells back then. This was before Tesla was switching to LFP. It was cheap. It was $40,000, which was pretty incredible, but the margins must have not been all that great because they quickly removed it. And of course now, within the last couple months, they have revived it, but it's no longer called the standard range. It has 260 miles of range and it's called the rear-wheel drive Model Y. Because of that higher weight, a lot of us expected it to be LFP. A lot of us thought, okay, if it's heavier than the old standard range, maybe this is using the same battery pack that's in the rear-wheel drive Model 3, just for vehicle symmetry. That sounded reasonable, but once people actually started taking delivery of them, we realized, okay, this is not LFP. It says so in the car. It's using the same kind of cells that you would find in the long range, just less of them. But that's where the plot has really gotten a lot more interesting. Are there actually less cells? Because now that people have been driving around and using the rear-wheel drive Model Y for a little bit, it's becoming abundantly clear that this vehicle is a lot more capable than people may think. First of all, on the website, they claimed the rear-wheel drive Model Y would cap out at 170 kilowatts, the same peak charge rate as the Model 3 rear-wheel drive. Another reason we thought it was LFP, but it's not. But once people actually took delivery of the car and started supercharging it, they realized it actually can get over 200 kilowatts. So this is another reason you can't completely trust everything Tesla says, because the charge rate, in fact, the charge curve, which is far more important in my opinion than the peak charging speed, is honestly game-changing with this rear-wheel drive Model Y. Probably the best charging curve we've ever seen in any Tesla. Much better than any Tesla with 4680 cells. We've been seeing some people now starting to road trip with their Cybertrucks, and yeah, those 4680 cells don't keep a peak current for very long. But this rear-wheel drive Model Y randomly is able to get better than advertised charging speeds, over 200 kilowatts. People were saying it was peaking out at around 215 kilowatts. But again, peak charging current you usually only hit for a few seconds, so it's not that big a deal. What matters a lot more is how long you're able to sustain a high charge current. And this vehicle, people are posting evidence that even at 82% state of charge, they were still pulling close to 80 kilowatts, which is absurdly fast if you know anything about how charging curves tend to taper off as the vehicle gets higher. That's part of the reason I'm so quick to always recommend people get the Model 3 rear-wheel drive, because yes, the range isn't quite as good as the long range, but the charging curve on it is pretty excellent. You can still be pulling, for me at least, usually around 70 kilowatts once you get into the 70% range. And of course it's LFP, so you can charge it to full as much as you want. That's pretty cool. You can't do that with the rear-wheel drive Model Y. However, the fact that it's able to keep pulling that high a current at that high a state of charge means that the road tripping experience with the rear-wheel drive might actually end up not being all that different from the road trip experience with the long range. Sure, if you're the kind of person that takes longer charging stops, the long range is still probably going to come out ahead, but if you're the kind of person that likes making the best overall time on your road trip, then the charging is going to play a huge factor in how quickly you get to your destination, because oftentimes with the long range vehicles, if the charge current gets low enough, it no longer makes sense for you to keep going above 75-80%. You're better off just unplugging and going back on your drive and stopping again, because you're going to charge a lot faster at lower states of charge. So a lot of people have been plugging in those Scan My Tesla apps to the rear-wheel drive Model Y and discovering that the battery pack inside these things is actually very similar to that of the long-range Model Y. Now, there's still some conflicting reports, and I don't know if these apps can be completely trusted. There's some people claiming that there's a slight kilowatt-hour difference, but others are saying they're reporting that the battery pack between the long range and the rear-wheel drive is actually the same. So what we could be looking at here is Tesla software limiting the same battery pack for the rear-wheel drive Model Y, which could mean, hypothetically speaking, of course, nothing is guaranteed, but did Tesla actually start building the long-range rear-wheel drive, the Model Y that they scrapped years ago, the actual first Tesla I ever ordered way back in the beginning of 2020? That was the original Model Y we were interested in getting, was the long-range rear-wheel drive. They ended up never making that one, but why would Tesla throw in these extra cells if you can't actually utilize them? Well, maybe because they're building the Model Y at such absurdly high volume that it's starting to make more sense to just keep using the same size battery packs. Don't complicate the assembly line, you know, the performance, the long range. We know they have the same size battery pack and they're manufactured in the same same way, so it's very easy to diversify, perhaps, if Tesla just keeps using that same 80 kilowatt hour battery pack using 2170 cells and puts that in the rear-wheel drive. But of course, they want you to spend more money on the long range and the performance, because those probably have better margins. So they software limit the battery pack. Now, that would be amazing if they actually, through some in-app purchase in the future, let you unlock more range. But knowing Tesla, there's a lot of times in the past where they've done this, similar to how for a couple of weeks they offered the standard range Model S and X. They had the exact same battery packs as the long range, just software limited. But are those cars ever going to get the option to unlock the remainder of that battery pack? Or perhaps does Tesla kind of just force you to keep the battery pack healthy by actually increasing the size of the buffer on the bottom and the top and never quite letting you charge to 100%, even if the car says it's at 100%? Now, it should be noted that according to the owner's manual and according to Tesla, you still should not charge the rear-wheel drive Model Y to 100% frequently. They still recommend 80% for daily driving, and I honestly think you should follow that. I think it would be quite a large gamble to just assume that, well, it's probably a software limited battery pack, so I'm just going to charge it to full every day anyway. If you end up wearing out your battery a lot faster, don't come crying to me, because I don't know how Tesla calibrates these cells. Do they perhaps use extra dummy cells in these battery packs that don't have as much energy? You know, they're kind of binned cells compared to what goes in the long range and the performance models. That would kind of align with what other people have documented when scanning the battery pack in the rear-wheel drive versus Model Y. Some say the long range has a reported 82 kilowatt hours total capacity, and the rear-wheel drive has 78 kilowatt hours. Maybe that extra 4 kilowatt hours are dummy cells, or cells that went bad and Tesla just found a manufacturing efficiency by putting some of those cells in the rear-wheel drive, so they're better off just not promising that it's gonna get the full 82 kilowatt hours, so they just tell you it's a 260 mile range. And who knows, maybe over time we find out that the degradation on the rear-wheel drive Model Y isn't quite as noticeable or as fast as it is on the long range or performance. That's a lot of speculation on my end, but it's just interesting to actually see the data in the real world use cases showcasing that the rear-wheel drive Model Y, which is $5,000 cheaper than the long range, yeah, it's actually pretty good with its charging curve, and it's not as many compromises as we originally thought. Now, is the extra $5,000 worth it for the guaranteed longer range, the guaranteed slightly faster charging curve? Also, the long range, you can get the 7-seater option. For some reason, you still can't get the 7-seater on the rear-wheel drive Model Y. I don't know why, but you can't. They have the same sound system in both, and of course, you get all-wheel drive if you opt for the long range. So depending on your use case, I can still understand why a lot of people might still opt for the long range, but I figured you guys should be more in the loop on how the rear-wheel drive Model Y is actually a far more compelling option than we originally thought, especially with a charging curve that insanely good. Pulling over 80 kilowatts after 80%, that's unheard of in any Tesla. In fact, that's pretty rare to see anywhere in the EV industry. And the question is why? Why is it so good? Why is the battery pack a lot bigger than Tesla lets you actually access? And then the big question at the end of the day, do you think Tesla will ever let people software unlock this extra buffer, like via in-app purchase? You get an option if you have a rear-wheel drive Model Y. Do you want to spend an extra $2,000 to increase your range by 20 miles or 30 miles? Would you spend that extra money? All your thoughts and comments, let me know what you're thinking down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. And thanks again, and have an excellent rest of your day.